When we talk about disability, you can think of really discrete things like blindness or hearing impairment. But if you think a bit more broadly, then you can think of any type of impairment in a person's body structure or function. Or you can define it in terms of activity limitations. So even though somebody might have full structural integrity of their body, perhaps based on cognitive overload, they can't manage some type of a task, such as shopping in a really busy place. Or you can think of it as participation restrictions. So these are kind of very broad governmental definitions of a disability. So participation means, can somebody fully engage in our society and the activities that we as a culture tend to engage in? So I'm going to try to broaden out the definition of disability a little bit more. You can think of not only physical things such as vision or mobility or the structure of the body, but also thinking and learning and communicating. These are things that the faculties of the human being that can be impaired in some way. And these aren't only going to happen to somebody on a permanent basis. So if you think of I have a degenerative eye condition, so I have a permanent disability. There's no prognosis of there going to be an improvement in my vision. This is something that I get to cope with and adapt to. This is not something that's either temporary, where I know that it will be resolved at some point if I can afford a surgery, or if if I get access to some technology that could augment me in a way that this doesn't matter. But other things, such as a broken arm, are temporarily disabling to some people. So if you break your arm, you only have one arm to function with. Even though that arm will heal for a short period in time, you will be temporarily disabled. And then there's also something situational or contextual disability. So if you're carrying your baby and you're trying to pick up a pot of boiling water, you suddenly want to be really careful because you only have one arm to balance that pot of boiling water. And even though you're not permanently or temporarily disabled as a being, you are contextually disabled because you're having to manage something with great care while trying to do another task. So the concept of disability isn't just about those of us who have some type of a permanent structural or biological difference. The big point is that a disability such as vision impairment isn't just a you have it or you don't have it type of situation. So there's various types of visual impairments. There's people like myself who have lost peripheral vision and have extreme tunnel vision, so I can only see what is directly in front of me. There's other macular degeneration, which happens in elderly people. Commonly is the macula, the center of the retina, goes away, and then they cannot see what's directly in front of them, but they can still see their periphery. There's also degradation in the acuity of vision. So if things are blurry when you take off your glasses, then you are experiencing an acuity deficiency. Or if you have some type of a neurological condition where you can't process visual information, a cortical blindness, then that's a whole other type of blindness that can create different types of effects. So the term blindness or visual impairment is actually this really huge, broad thing. And with the broadness of actual effects, there's also a whole other degree of broadness with adaptation. So some people have learned to navigate by doing echolocation, by actively sending noise out to hear objects around them. Most people are trained to use a white cane to navigate. Some people refuse to use a white cane because they feel like it makes them stand out in a crowd in a way that they don't want. And so they will navigate with their hands out more often. So there's all sorts of different ways to adapt to a disability. And as many people as there's ways to adapt to a disability. So that's an important thing to remember, which is we're talking about a huge space, a huge complicated space, when we talk about disability adaptation and the variations of each one of these disabilities. So now we know disability is this huge broad term. Assistive technology is the thing that helps somebody with a disability, permanent, temporary, or contextual, to perform some type of a task. There's really common assistive technology that many of you have seen or experienced. There's a wheelchair when you go to the hospital, crutches if you get a leg injury. We don't use the forearm crutches as much, but that's another type of crutch to help people walk if they can't put as much weight on their legs. There's eyeglasses, and then there's dogs and white canes to help commonly people who are blind navigate the world. And accessibility, so there's people with disabilities, there's assistive technology to help them do a thing, and then there's this phrase accessibility. Accessibility is how do you interface the world either with the person or with their assistive technology. So as a visually impaired person, I may use a screen reader to access information on a website. The screen reader is the software that looks at the actual HTML code and presents some information to me about it. If somebody has done visual layout using a table, then I'm getting this tabular data and trying to interpret it as tabular data rather than interpret it as just laid out data. So this is an example of semantic HTML allowing a screen reader to give somebody access to the actual intended meaning behind the content and the visual layout that's been put on the page. So it's not a tabular set of data, it's actually just visual data laid out for people to be able to understand, the relation of things together, but it's not actually data. Other things, closed captioning or open captioning or live captioning are all types of, accessibility things that help people engage in the world around them, either through their assistive technology or through their own being. Curb cuts are a fun one. I won't go on a rant about that because it's a great one. You'll hear it if you get interested in the space. And then bus ramps are another good example of kind of a wheelchair is this amazing piece of assistive technology, but in order to be able to access a bus, you have to have some type of an accessibility infrastructure in place to help somebody use their wheelchair to get onto the bus. There's sometimes tension, and I don't think there needs to be tension between assistive technology and universal design. So universal design is generally an approach to make a thing that lots of people can use. Make it so that it's not a special version for a person who has a visual impairment and a different version for people without visual impairments. So this really fancy looking watch is actually totally tactile, and I have one, which is why I put it up there. So it's a tactile watch, but it's not branded as a tactile watch, and people who are sighted also seem to really enjoy the watch because it has a really cool kind of novel look to it. And so that's something that's designed to be useful to somebody who doesn't have vision, as well as kind of aesthetically pleasing to those who do. And other examples are cuteness is something that it appeals to a broad swath of people. So I'm universally designing this to appeal emotionally to people. And the Bop It toy I think is phenomenal because it's this incredible multi-sensory thing where you pull it and it says, wah, and bop it, and then you have to hit it and then it makes a noise. And it's this totally immersive multi-sensory thing, which is kind of universally designed for anybody to be able to enjoy. For more people to be able to enjoy, there's definitely impairments that would cause some struggle. And the reason it fits into MIT with all of our extreme future thinking is because assistive technology often pushes the bounds of things such as voice interactions and the Internet of Things and the smart home. I had a friend 15 years ago, and they had a clock that you could yell across to, and it came out of Japan, and it was made for blind people to be able to do far field, wake word, and then tell you the time. That same microphone array is what now exists inside of some of these Google Home and Alexa devices. So a lot of these things that were a bit fringe, helping people who couldn't read clocks get voice activation and get information about the clock, is now this prolific thing that we all know about as an Alexa or Siri or something like this. There's also some robotics research. When you start interfacing robots with humans, you have to be extremely careful to respect the interaction and the fragility of the human being. And so it pushes robotics to be way more delicate than many other applications of robotics. So it can be a really exciting place to work if you want to worry about delicate robotics that can interface with a human in a safe way. And just two more quick words of definition. So co-design is the process of getting down into the weeds with people who are experiencing what they're experiencing, learning about it, ask some users what's actually going on and what things they would really need. And then my own little tweak on that is to push students to do humanistic co-design, which is to worry about the person first and not problematize the person. So start by getting to know what makes them tick, what things they care about, what are the reasons why they want to go out into the world. Is it so that they can see family, or so that they can play sports, and find that thing that makes you kind of connect as a human with that natural instinct to engage in your community and your society. And then you can start to, do the co-design process. But I always try to get the students to spend less time being engineers up front and more time being people. So that's hopefully you all just got a crash course in disability, assistive technology, co-design, accessibility.